It was the fall of 2005, and I was starting kindergarten. I was so excited to meet new friends and finally be a big kid, but most importantly because I felt like I was at the age where I could pick out what I wanted to wear. So I was picking out my clothes when my mom asked me what I was doing, and I simply said that I was just picking out my first day of school outfit. She looked at me like I was speaking a different language, and she says, "No, honey, you have to wear the uniform that we got you. You can't wear whatever you want." And that's how my first day of school went. I never really thought more about the topic until recently when I went to my mom's school. She teaches at a private school and they too wear uniforms, and I just got to thinking, why in the hell do they wear these things anyways? Throughout my speech, I will talk about when the first uniforms came to be and then go into detail about how it evolved throughout the United States, and to see what are the numbers for how many public schools versus how many private schools still wear uniforms today. And then I will conclude with some of the problematic issues that are presented when making uniforms mandatory in a school system. The first form of uniforms in education took place in England around 222 when the Archbishop at that time enforced that students wear a robe-like outfit when they attended school. The origin of the modern-day uniform can be traced back to the 16th century England when the low-class children attending Christ Hospital boarding school wore a blue cloak. And from that point on, the U.S. had adopted the custom of uniform wearing. The first public school in the U.S. that started to implement uniform was a school in Maryland and also a school in Washington, D.C. in the fall of 1987. These programs were totally voluntary, but most parents supported the idea of uniform wearing. These schools said that these uniforms will help with kids' frame of mind and that by wearing them will reduce discipline problems. By 1988, more than 39 public elementary schools and one junior high in Washington, D.C. mandated that uniforms must be worn if a child was to attend that school. Over time, this eventually led to surrounding states starting to implement the uniform policy. Now we know the origins, we can fast forward to 1994 in the U.S. to see how they've adopted uniforms. In 1994 was the first time that a school district started to implement K-8 uniforms in the U.S., and since then other schools started to as well. In the same year, the governor of California allowed schools to start enforcing uniform wearing. In 1996, Bill Clinton was a big advocate for uniform wearing, and he believed that if it reduced crime and bullying among kids and teenagers, then maybe it wasn't such a bad idea to wear uniforms. As it progressed throughout the U.S., it caused many people to try and say that making kids wear uniforms is unconstitutional. It got to a point where a school district in Florida suggested that parents could be put in jail if the child did not comply with wearing a uniform. Not only do parents feel like they have to do this or else be put in jail, but there is also a factor of religion. In the case that took place in Northern Carolina in 2000, a child refused to wear a uniform because it conflicted with religious beliefs. Shockingly, there are more public schools in the U.S. that wear uniforms than private schools. It is said that in a place that are more rural, 10% of those schools make kids wear uniforms, whereas more urban cities, they are 40% more likely to have implement uniforms into their schools. So as a result to all of these, there are still a lot of schools in the U.S. that are still wearing uniforms both at the private level and the public. Now that we have seen how it has evolved throughout the U.S., we can now look further into some of the problematic issues that are presented with uniforms. In many cases, people have to pay out of pocket for these uniforms that are required that children who attend must wear. And foremost, they have to get more than one uniform because they have to wear the same thing 5 days a week. And this starts to add up, especially for those low-income families. This becomes problematic because a low-income child might not be able to afford getting 3 different uniforms rather than a middle to upper class family who can afford to get 5 uniforms for the 5 school days. And this is where it becomes a problem. They say that wearing uniforms makes everyone feel united, but for some kids, they do not feel united. Due to them being lower class and not being able to afford the different kinds of uniforms that are being offered. Another thing that can be problematic with wearing uniforms is the religious aspect. Like I had mentioned earlier, some religious beliefs have a dress code of their own, and with going to a school that requires a child to wear something that is against their religious beliefs can be very problematic. I believe that the only solution to this would be to keep uniforms, but to allow children to get their own clothes. For instance, if the uniforms are white and navy blue, the child would tell their parents those colors, and the parents would then go buy the clothes in that color, which would allow parents to get more than one uniform for a lot cheaper. The significance of this is that there are still schools that still wear uniforms today, and I do not believe that these schools take into consideration many factors that I have mentioned. All in all, I really do not see what the benefits are in wearing uniforms. I believe that there are more good things that come out of allowing kids to wear what they want within guidelines than wearing a uniform which makes everyone look exactly the same.